Okay, today we will be talking about the expenditure categories of their economic importance. So these are the basic terms that you every now and then you will meet. So it's important that you know these terms because these are terms that every now and then you're going to encounter. Now, so what are the major current operating expenditures of the national government? Okay, so the major operating expenditures of the national government are personal services, which are payment of the salaries, okay, wages, social security contributions, overtime payment, and etc. By the way, in government, they are prohibited to render overtime work, okay, generally, but there are exemptions which sometimes they ask permission from the commission and audit. Now, so maintenance and other operating expenses or MOOE. The other one is the first one is PS or personal services, while the other one is maintenance and other operating expenditures. Okay, such as traveling expenses, supplies and materials, water, illumination, and power services, rent, etc. Okay, so interest payments, allotments of the local government units, subsidies to government-owned and controlled corporations. So these are utility payments which are necessary for the services. So where are they going to get this? They have to ask this in Congress from the previous payments that they had, okay, together with the proof. Now, what is government's policy regarding current operating expenditures? The government's policy regarding the current operating expenditures may be summarized as follows. One, limit the growth of current operating expenditures with provisions for inflation adjustments. Okay, and encourage cost reduction measures in operation, particularly overhead expense items. If the government was able to limit the cost, okay, through its cost cutting measures, the savings they have or the money that they get from that forms part of their savings. Okay, and the savings supposedly should be returned to the national treasury for Congress to make a law on how are they going to use it. Now, countless times when the government agency use its savings to fund a certain project that should be denied or not authorized. Okay? Why? Because their job is only to implement what Congress give them. So in case they're going to use the money, they have to ask permission from the body or branch of government that authorizes them to use the money. Okay, so that's the reason why the DAP and PDAF was declared unconstitutional because the law grants allows them to use the money, but in case they have savings, supposedly they are not authorized to use it. Okay, for their own services without asking permission from the Congress. Okay, it is as if that they are the one who makes the law. Okay, so if there are savings, supposedly it should be returned to the national government and let Congress makes a statute or law to how to use that savings. Okay. So, however, the executive branch or in and this Supreme Court, which is the judicial branch of government, may or has the power on how to use its savings. Now, provided adequate maintenance Funds for infrastructure facilities, okay, control the growth of spending of personal services within the level that can be sustained by available resources. So the head of the agency will go to Congress to ask for fund for the payment of their workers. Okay, and as much as possible, they are prohibited from hiring unless it's necessary. So if it's approved by the board that they can hire, then later on they will ask Congress to augment the fund for personal services. Now, what are other sources of savings in personal services? Because there are major sources of savings. One is from the personal services. If the employee resigns, okay, or retires, then the budget that is allotted for him forms part of the savings. Okay, for miscellaneous and other operating expenses or maintenance and other operating expenses, they were able to save money, then that forms part of savings. Now, in the other source of fund is the capital outlays of the national government. Okay, are appropriations spent for the purchase of goods and services, the benefits of which extend beyond the fiscal year and which add to the assets of government, including investments in capital stocks of government-owned and controlled corporations and their subsidiaries. So the projects that comes from the capital outlay. Okay, so normally the highest budget for the government agency is for capital outlay, okay, because it is the investment of government which later on can be a source of fund. Okay, and it also creates jobs. Why? For example, there are projects like roads, construction of a building. Well, it creates jobs, but and later on um, it is a source of income because it will be used later on as government office or other projects, income generating projects. So, so this capital outlay extend beyond the fiscal year. So if the fiscal year starts in January 1 and ends in December 31, which is the fiscal year of the government, the capital outlay extends beyond that. Unlike in personal services and miscellaneous and other operating expenses is only budgeted within the fiscal year. But projects which cannot be accomplished normally in just 1 year, it extends up to another year, another fiscal year. So, and add the assets of government, including investments in the capital stocks of government owned and controlled corporations. So, this forms part of the capital stocks of the GOCC under subsidiaries. Subsidiaries are like a branch which is under the which is created by the agency or a government owned and controlled corporation. May also do business other than what it is originally intended for it. Okay? But the creation of subsidiaries must be in relation to the charter which the government owned and controlled corporations was created. Otherwise, the function or its creation would be ultra vires, meaning it is not within the powers of the GOCC. Okay. Example, if the GOCC grants fund for education, okay, the agency that is in charge of education cannot divest the fund to have other projects other than education. Okay, so it should be in relation to the charter which creates the agency. Now, capital outlays of the national government may be broadly classified as follows. One is infrastructure outlays. Okay, so equity contribution to government corporations, capital transfers to local government units, and other capital outlays. Okay, so it may invest in other projects, capital outlay transfer to government units. Now, capital expenditure, particularly those classified as capital goods or durable goods, okay, to be used for non-military and productive purposes such as construction of roads and bridges, dams, power and irrigation works, schools and hospitals, other generally desirable because of their high multiplier effect in the economy. Okay, this is the one I'm talking about, the creation of those facilities. Aside from it creates jobs, in the future it will still be a source, it will become a source of fund. Okay, business later on will derive in it. And well, in case of dam, for example, it increases the productivity of the farmers. Okay, so it has a multiplier effect. Now, that is, they stimulate the growth and expansion of economic activities of the private sector and facilitate the integration of the industries. Now, the government projects, although it is funded by government, sometimes the one who will be directly affected or who will benefit our private sector. Okay, but it is so because the private sector, aside from the money that they gave to the national government, they also share to the national government in the form of the tax, and some of those are even hiring of the employees. Okay, and later on these employees as well share in the national budget for giving a portion of their income in a form of tax. Okay, so the government provides project, but the private sector who benefit from that also contribute to the national government in a form of employing workers and payment of tax, both corporate tax, which is higher, and personal tax from the employees, okay, which they gave to the national government every month, okay, depending on the status of the employees, whether he's single, normally it's higher compared to married or head of the family, okay. So higher because we punish the single, so it would perhaps encourage workers to get married so that they will have lesser tax. Now, facilitate the integration of the industries. This is what I'm talking about. It creates jobs. Now, what are infrastructure expenditures? Infrastructure expenditures refer to the disbursement of funds for the construction of various basic public works of the country, such as roads, ports, airports, water supply, irrigation, and other capital investments, the benefits of which extend to general public. Okay, now, who will benefit from this? There are projects of government, and yet everybody benefits or only few benefits. Okay, who are what they call these are called the free riders. Okay, that is why when you make project, make it sure that it should be for everybody. Okay, not that only few will benefit. Okay, so what do you mean by free rider? Meaning you just ride into the benefit. For example, a street lights, for example. Okay, although everybody will benefit of that from that. Okay, so even if you are not a taxpayer, you didn't even pay for the government, and yet you also benefit. So in choosing a project, we have to make it sure that those who contribute as much as possible will also be benefiting from the projects. Now, in the national government, infrastructure expenditure generally refer to the capital outlays of the Department of Public Works and Highways and the Department of Transportation and Communication, the school building program of the Department of Education, Culture and Sports, or right now it's the Department of Education, and the national irrigation projects of the Department of Agriculture. What constitute the other capital outlays mentioned a while ago? The other capital outlays of the government consist of land acquisition and land improvement outlays, okay, buildings and structures outlays. Can the local government unit, by the way, acquire lands? Yes, okay, it can acquire land. We call it as a patrimonial property. So they can dispose it lands which are intended for public. Okay, these are public domain. Okay, it cannot be a portion or even be a subject of commerce. But if it's acquired through other modes aside from intended for the public, then it can sell. Okay, because although that forms part of a patrimonial property, which in nature is a private commodity which can be disposed even by government. Okay, now buildings and structure outlays, okay, acquisition of vehicles form parts of other capital outlay, aircraft, water transport vehicles, equipment, furniture, fixtures, etc. So meaning the government may own actually a property. So how about roads? Can it acquire? It can, but it should always be for general public. It can even acquire private property through expropriation, provided that there are provide there are processes, and one of that process is a passage of an ordinance, okay, creating or appropriating private land for public use. Okay, in the national level, um, it does not require even expropriation automatic, but in the local level it always requires a notice a and a payment. Okay, and the payment must be 15% of the current fair market value. Okay, for a while. Excuse me. Okay, so that's it. There are still other sources of capital outlays again. Um, buildings, structure outlays, and acquisition of vehicles. Those are capital outlay. Okay, you get that acquisition of vehicle, other equipment from the capital outlay. Now, what are capital transfers to local government units? Capital transfer to local government units pertain to the portion of the internal revenue allotment which are actually a share of the local government units um to it. So it's their national share which forms part of the income of the local government units, which accrue to the LG equivalent to not less than 20% of their IRA allocation earmarked for development projects such as construction or improvement, repair, and maintenance of local roads, concrete, barangay roads, all multipurpose pavements, and the rehabilitation and improvement of the communal irrigation project system. Okay. So by the way, there is a provision, although there's a limit that portion of the income will go to the IRA, but Congress actually may lower it in case of emergency or and when the economy is not doing well, instead of giving it that amount percentage of the national level, it may lower it down provided that there is a a law or a resolution by Congress that the IRA will be lower than the usual disallowed. Okay, I'm thinking that, well, I think Congress can do that because of the pandemic. They can lower down the budget intended for the local government unit as part of the IRA. They can lower it down. Now, what are equity contributions to government corporations? Equity contributions to government corporation refer to the national government investment in the authorized capital stock of the government-owned and controlled corporation. What are interest payment? These are money which being borrowed and incur interest. Okay, part of that is that forms part of interest payments, which may be budgeted, which may be defended when you ask for budget. Interest payment represent the cost of borrowed funds, which form part and parcel of the cost of the items financed by loan. Interest payments are therefore considered as a real expense item in the budget. Now, how is the national government budget sectorally allocated? Okay, the national government budget is allocated according to the following sectors: social services, economic services, defense, general public services, and debt burden. Allocation for social services include those for education, culture, and manpower development, health services, a social security, welfare, and employment, and B, housing and community development, and the last is land distribution. What is general public service expenditures? Are those that are spent for general administration, such as general government stipulation of fiscal affairs, foreign affairs, and internal commitments, electoral, audit, civil service, and lawmaking functions, and public order and safety, including various functions pertaining to law enforcement, the maintenance of public order, safety, and political administration. Expenditures for debt burden are those that go into servicing of government regular and assumed debts from domestic and foreign sources, including interest payments. How are the expenditures categorized by cost structure? Okay, or what is the significance of this categorization? One is the national government budget is broken down into the following cost categories. One is general administration and support, and then support to operations, and the other is projects. Now, expenditures for the general administration represent those that are normally considered as agency overhead. That is, or IDS, the cost of general supervision, okay, of both the entire of the national and local government, which the agency will incur to exist as a unit. Okay, so for it to perform its mandate, then they need that general administration expense. Examples of expenditures for general administration and support are those spent for management and supervision, human resource development, and for productivity incentive benefits. Okay, support operations refer to those activities that facilitate the performance of the agency mandated functions and services. Okay, example of the expenditures under this category are those that are meant for policy formulation, planning, like seminars, programs for project coordination, monitoring, and evaluation. That's why some of the government heads Department head normally travel every month or okay, just to monitor the projects and for information management support system. Expenditures for operations and those that go to regular activities directly addressing the agency mandates. It is what I'm talking about. To perform its jobs as it is mandated, then it requires those funds for monitoring. They include the expenditure programs involving the production of goods, delivery of the public service, regulation of the societal activities, conduct basic governance, and or provision of general management and supervision of the entire government bureaucracy. Okay, so that's their job. Department secretary every now and then will consult or address each program to the regional directors. Regional directors in on their part monitor the agencies under them. Okay, now projects expenditures that fund activities which result in the accomplishment of an identifiable outputs within the designated period. Okay, project expenditures may be sourced of foreign assistance or from local funding. They may actually ask foreign assistance, like there are many NGOs right now, or even foreign government. They may even have projects, okay, like USAID, for example, or AUSAID, US, for example, and countries like Australia may even help. Categorization of the budget by functional cost components allow for a better analysis of government expenditure to focus on more priority needs, thus improving the quality of government spending. Okay, so that ends the topic today. Those who were not able to, okay,